I have always kind of fallen into using data to improve what I'm doing.
Why data? Why is it so important to the way that we do things?
We had to make a decision, and that decision was totally based on the data that we had in front of us.
I asked you a question about data, and you started talking about soft skills, which I think is really interesting.
Yeah, they loved it. They thought it was such a cool idea, and on its face, it really is. But it turns out their customers hated it. Like, you don't have to measure everything, but there are certain things that are important. Identify what those are and focus only there.
Welcome to the Cincinnati Business Podcast, where we give you practical tips and tricks to grow yourself and your business. And brought to you by the Cincinnati Podcast Studio. So some of you guys, if you've been around for a little bit, may remember Matt Appenzeller was the second guest on this show. There was a line that he said on his show, and I'm going to butcher it, so I'm going to put it in right here.
Brian, I'm an older guy. You're a lot younger than me. Your generation has grown up in an ocean of data and has come to expect that all business decisions are rooted in data. Now, if we have an entire industry that has been around for hundreds of years and is still not using data, I think that does not bode well for how your generation is going to view chambers of commerce.
Data matters in a way that it never has before. Like, for people of his generation, it's a whole different space. It's like they made decisions made on gut feeling or business acumen or other things like that. And while some of that is still done today, a lot of millennials and even younger rely on the idea of data. How can we use data to create informed decisions that will help grow our business? And so today I'm really excited that I've got Kyle Carter here. We're going to be talking about data. So Kyle, tell us a little bit about your qualifications, why I would ask you to be on a show talking about data.
So I don't know if I'm the right person to be having this conversation with you, but I've been in the contact center and CX space for the last 25 years since I was in college. Part of what I've always enjoyed about it is looking at data and finding better ways to interact based off of data. So I founded a company back in 2017, Zenylitics. We work with AI-enabled conversation intelligence. So we help customers look at their interactions at scale and figure out ways to best work with their customers, whether it's sell, whether it's service their customers, find out what they're saying about their products, anything that you can extract from that, that unstructured dark data. That's what we help organizations with. So that's really where I've gotten involved deeply into the data space.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. But I mean, I'm curious, like, we were joking a little bit earlier, but like, what would make someone like yourself interested in data in the first place?
That's funny. Like, I have always kind of fallen into using data to improve what I'm doing. I was always the guy who would like build my own models to help me draft better fantasy football teams or, anything simple like that. And I apply it to my day-to-day life. I also apply it to how I work. So thinking about how we interact, I started as a contact center rep when I was a sophomore in college. So that got me into that space. And then I really moved into, leadership roles and trying to find ways to best optimize how we interact. I've always found fascinating. I love language. And language is really a hard thing to quantify. So that's always been incredibly interesting to me.
Hey, welcome to the Cincinnati Podcast Studio. We built this studio for creators like you. So whether you're just starting out or you've been producing episodes for a while, our mission is to help make podcasting easy and enjoyable.
This is where the magic happens. We've got the space, the equipment,
a shower for some reason,
and the production help you need so that you can focus on your content. Whether you're in studio or recording remotely, we'll make sure everything looks and sounds professional.
Finally ready to start that podcast? Let's make something great.
Well, I think it is interesting because you kind of found this weird cross-section of human communication and data that honestly is a some people view it as a black hole of like, if we're having conversations, what can I actually pull out of this? Yeah. Like, now obviously things like that have started to exist in the last few years of AI note takers and all those other things are really starting to exist, and insights can be gathered from those sort of situations. But you're talking about 2017. The word AI was not bandied about. Back in those days, it was more like machine learning. It was other phrases and stuff like that. So what was it that kind of initially got you into the world of computer intelligence?
So I was working for a financial services organization that had regulatory oversight, and they brought me in along with some of the technologies that we use to ensure that the hundreds of agents, hundreds of people that we had interacting with customers were doing what we needed them to do and not doing it in a way that would cause harm to anyone. So there's not a way that you can do that manually. If you think you've got 500 people sitting, taking phone calls or doing chats all day, there's no way that you can really get your arms around that without using technology like this. And that's really what brought me into it. Once we were able to achieve that goal, we started looking at it and saying, like, wait, we can apply this to customer experience. We can apply this to product intelligence. So how do our customers think about the product that we're providing to them? How can we use that for marketing? And it just kind of snowballed from there.
I love that. And I think that totally makes sense, because there are these classic ideas that there are certain ages in our world, like where there was the industrial era, there was the medieval era, and a lot of people will say that we're kind of in this space right now called the information age. Yeah. And now that we're kind of looking at that space, one of the things that I think is really interesting is there is so much information out there that people don't quite understand how much is actually out there. In fact, like when I look at companies like Apple and how they are talking about commitments to you keeping your data and all this sort of stuff, I'm like, I think that is great. I think it's a worthwhile thing to go after. But the amount of data that's already out there on every single human being, you're not contributing that much more, like that they're actually trying to guard. But I think what I'm trying to think through, and I want your help on this, is there's so much data out there, and especially the small businesses of the world. When we're talking about data, we don't have the time to harness what we might have in front of us. And maybe not even recognizing the fact that some data is so vitally important for us to pay attention to. So I love how you have this background of trying to understand how data informs the decisions that you make. But like, why data? Why is it so important to the way that we do things?
I think every decision that we make, whether it's in your business life or in just day to day, is based on data, whether you know it or not. We were talking earlier about like the idea of, I'm a terrible golfer. I would golf with my grandfather when I was a kid, and one of the first things he would do in the tee box would just pick up a little bit of grass and just sprinkle it in the air. And that tells you which way the wind's blowing. Like, that's data. You're observing things and you don't even realize it. So, to be able to make decisions based on data, it generally improves your outcomes, right? You mentioned companies like Apple and Google and so on. They're extremely good about how they use their data. I used to joke when I started in this space that like I could think about buying a flannel shirt, and the next day I would open up my laptop and Google knew about it, and it would be a banner ad on the side there for me. They're incredibly good about using that data and understanding how to drive their business forward. For small businesses, being overwhelmed, and that's generally the market that we play in, is like small and mid-sized businesses. It's overwhelming. There's so much there. It's what do I focus on? And we really focus on the concept of simplicity. Like you don't have to measure everything, but there are certain things that are important. Identify what those are and focus only there. That's where your energy should be. It's really to simplify and boil it down. For your business that you want to drive additional revenue. Maybe EBITDA is your the metric you want to push. Customer acquisition, whatever it is. Figure out what those are, and then figure out the levers, the things underneath it that you can move, and that's really it. That's where all of your energy should be spent. And we really, really push that. When we start bringing conversation data to customers, they're going, well, I want to know everything under the sun. And we have to say, like, hold on, like, slow down. We put clear guardrails on what we're going to work on. That idea might be great. We'll get there eventually, but let's focus on the thing that's really going to help you achieve your goal, whether it's, again, revenue, et cetera.
Yeah.
So it's all about simplifying and focusing on the few things that matter. And there's usually only a couple of them.
Well, so then I'm curious, are you seeing that there's some trends that everyone needs to keep track of certain types of data?
It depends. I mean, we're so focused on the conversational side and like how you interact with customers or how you engage with businesses, vendors, et cetera. We see a lot of businesses focusing on how their teams are educated about their products and, how much understanding they have. Really the idea of becoming an expert or like a trusted advisor about a particular product, that's where AI can come in and help with that. But that's a really strong thing. It seems silly, but something we work on with every one of our customers is some variation of like soft skills. Like, how are you empathetic to someone who's struggling? The best customer is the customer you never have to talk to. Right? They buy something from you and you never hear from them again. But that's not the real world. Something like, how do we respond to them when they're having friction? They have a problem with a product. They have a problem with a service. We see in sales environments, confidence is important. And it's not just how you say something. It's the way that you express it verbally. Like, I can solve that problem for you, or I have something to solve that problem for you, and how you drive additional engagement. So those are a lot of things that we see that are consistent. Many times there's different slices on it by industry, by use case, but there are a lot of themes that are pretty consistent.
That totally makes sense. I mean, it is funny because I asked you a question about data and you started talking about soft skills, which I think is really interesting.
Yeah.
Like, are you finding that, I know that you work with a lot of large companies. And one of the things that usually if a company is that large, they have a lot of the basic skills of data understanding, at least somewhat down, I would assume. Maybe not in the conversational space that you're currently working in, but at least they know how to track a P&L pretty well. But it sounds like you're talking about like the skills of actually being able to empathize, connect, talk with somebody is actually way more important in some of these spaces.
In some it is, absolutely. And you make the connection between data and soft skills and how do those things line up, right? Like how we speak, how we interact, that's unstructured, right? There's not really any structure to that. And that's what we try and do is we try and take that unstructured interaction and bring structure to it so we can measure it, right? So bigger organizations, yeah, I mean, there are some, like we were talking about the Titans, the Apples, the Googles, they've got their arms around it, I'm sure. We've worked with some larger organizations that are really, really good with their data. They make great decisions. There's others that they have data in piles everywhere and it doesn't talk to each other. And that's problematic, right? Your marketing team has their set of data, but it doesn't talk to product and it doesn't talk to your CX teams that are interacting with your customers. And there's this huge disconnect between those segments of your business, and that's problematic. And I don't think that's necessarily just a large business problem. I think it's something that happens regardless of size, and it's a problem we see across the board.
Well, I'm curious then, you have been called into a lot of scenarios where your help has been requested because they're trying to learn something. They're trying to organize what you're calling a lot of unstructured data and like bring it into something that's actionable. So you and I have been talking offline of a couple of examples of things that you walked into the room and completely changed the minds of people the moment you walked in. Can you walk me through some of those?
Yeah, so we were working with a consumer products company, massive organization. They sell products that you have in your kitchen, in your laundry room, all over the house. They were very interested in customer feedback. What is our sentiment, so on. And we came in, took a look at all of their interactions, phone, chat, et cetera. They had recently just gone out and spent a quite a few $1 million on a product they thought was the coolest thing under the sun.
On paper, it's a pretty cool idea.
It is a pretty cool idea. It's a super cool idea. We were actually talking before about like what use cases it would work really well in. This wasn't necessarily one of them. But it allowed their customers, when they had to troubleshoot X product, they could reach out and do a video call. And they would be able to troubleshoot with somebody on the other end, a product expert. They loved it. They thought it was such a cool idea. And on its face, it really is. But it turns out their customers hated it. Like across the board, absolutely despised this, because all they wanted was a quick resolution. I don't want to call and sit on a video call with somebody for an hour to fix this product. I just want to put it in a box, ship it back to you, and maybe just warranty it or fix it for me. And, I'll figure out the rest. There was so much extra stress or friction that was put on that customer, and it just didn't work for them. And that was a hard conversation to have. 70%-ish of their negative sentiment was in or around that process. And and that was hard for them to hear. They had all of this internal fanfare about this great thing that they were doing, and it really didn't have that impact. So yeah, that was a very, very hard conversation to have, but you have the data behind it. And that's something we always use data to build trust. I could tell you that product, that idea is bad, but if I have the data to back it up, it's going to be a much stronger sell because I have something to rely on.
I think you're right. And I think that's the interest. It was an interesting moment when you told me that story originally for me, gut reaction, I would have agreed with them.
Yeah.
That this is a great idea.
Yeah.
Like, oh yeah, you are more friendly to your customers. You get to interact better with your customers. And then you can satisfy their needs technically quicker. Like theoretically you can fix the problem, be done, and you're good to go. Yeah. But they were like, heck no.
Yeah. In theory, it's great. In practice, not so great.
Yeah. It reminds me of the example of, I don't know who it was that was quoted saying this. My guess is it's Elon Musk. But he was talking about the idea that electric cars will never be implemented until they are better and easier to use than gasoline cars. And I think the same way about something like that, where like the idea was great, like helpful, interesting, but is it easier? No. They want a return label, they want to send it in a box, and they want to get it back fixed.
Yep. We were talking earlier, like that product, that idea is great if it's, helping my 16-year-old daughter who's just learning how to drive. If it's helping her change her tire on the side of the road somewhere, that's awesome. Like that solves, the stakes are way higher. It's not my blender, right? It's like I can now get a solution quickly to a high stakes issue. That totally makes sense, but it didn't work in practice for this particular moment.
So what's another example of a time where something kind of changed the perspective?
So we're currently working with an organization that has a network of urgent care centers, and they've never really looked at themselves like in the same lens that I would from like a contact center perspective. They have people in the center that are picking up the phone and trying to get traffic through the door. For them, traffic equals revenue. The more people that come in, the more revenue I make. It's a pretty simple correlation. But they're realizing they're growing, and they're like, look, we have to get our arms around how we interact with our customers, right? And the people that are coming in. How can we better do that? How can we make it a more consistent experience from site A to site B? So we started working with them, and very early on, we realized that they have people that call in all the time and say, do you have availability? Can I come in and have whatever procedure done? I sprained my ankle, whatever it is. And almost half of the time, their employees that were picking up the phone were saying, yeah, just walk in. You can even book online, but yeah, just walk in, no big deal. And if you think about it, the people, their customers or their prospective customers are in need of something. It's in their name, urgently, right? They want something done right away. That's an opportunity for them to book an appointment, to schedule something, right? So if I've got a sprained ankle, or if I need to get stitches or something like that, I'm going to go to the first place I see. But if I've got an appointment, if I've scheduled something, I still may go somewhere else, but I'm way more likely to go to the place that I just talked to that took care of me. So we found half of the time they were telling people, just walk in, no big deal. So that's actually what we're working on with them. So simple. And I mentioned simplicity before. It's such a simple thing. They had never even looked at that. One of their leadership team said, we've never even talked about, having a policy or a plan when somebody calls in and says, hey, do you have availability or an appointment? They just assumed that people knew. And until we looked at it and said, in the last 2 months, you've missed 3,000 opportunities that people could have just walked out the door.
Wow.
They have an idea of what each one of those customers means to them in revenue.
Yeah.
That's a real problem. And it's one single simple behavior that we can focus on. So it doesn't have to be this massive sentiment analysis project for these huge organizations. That's something that can truly change their business. And if you can't tell, I love this stuff. I'm a super nerd for this stuff. But it's really interesting that something so simple could drive their business to such a better place.
Yeah. I love that. And I think that's a really interesting look. Because again, when I think about data, I don't think about conversation.
Yeah.
I don't think about it like that. And I love that that's the perspective you come at it from, and how such a simple thing like that probably across their network resulted in millions in extra revenue that they could have made.
We're working on it.
I think that's interesting.
And that's a thing that we're tracking for them. And I mean, this is like recent news for us. This is the last couple of weeks.
Crazy.
So this is brand new for them. And there's a lot of work. It's not just snap your fingers and it changes. Behavioral change takes time. It doesn't show up like a hockey stick. It's going to be gradual over time. So there's going to be a lot of work to happen, but we're going to track it. We're going to make sure that they're getting the appropriate results and adjust as we go.
So then what would you say, in your experience, is data that people normally miss, like businesses normally miss, that they should be paying attention to?
It's interesting. I think the vast majority of businesses know what their KPIs are, what their key performance indicators. That's your primary metric. I need to make more money. I need revenue or EBITDA, whatever it is. I think the thing that most of our customers, what we see, what they miss are the secondary indicators, the leading indicators, the levers you can pull, right? What can I do to make more money? The urgent care example I gave you is a great one. They know they want more foot traffic. Foot traffic equates to revenue, but how do I drive more foot traffic? In my space, when we think about contact center or conversations, it's what can I do to increase my chances of somebody coming through that door? So we would say that secondary metric would be that behavior. So a lot of organizations don't know what those levers are. And I think that is where you have to really simplify, is looking at what's the metric that I want to drive, and come up with a hypothesis and say, what do I think I can do to change that or to improve that? And is there a way that I can measure it?
Yeah.
In a conversational sense, like we're talking about with the urgent care example.
Well, that's, I think, where some of the idea of SMART goals came from. And I think the hardest thing about KPIs often is they're trailing indicators. They're not leading indicators.
Of course.
So I think if I'm understanding you correctly, you're saying if we can take these KPIs, turn them into leading indicators, which is active things you can do to increase that number versus saying, oh, I wish that number was higher. That's what you're saying most people seem to miss.
Yeah, it's what can I impact, right? I know for my business, so one of the reasons I'm here is one of my initiatives for this year is I need to, and I'm preaching to the choir on this, I need to grow our brand awareness, right? So what can I do to do that? So I know some of the metrics that I can measure my brand awareness with. But what are the things that I can do to grow that, right? So it's exactly that. It's how do I take that initiative or that KPI, and how do I find the the way to really drive it. Again, it's that lever that we can pull. So
I think you're totally right. And I know I'm being very affirmative, but I agree with everything you're saying, because this is so interesting. Like, we sat down as a business we were 6 months into the year. We were having our second quarter review, and we literally wrote down every customer that we had, all the money that we had made from that customer. We categorized each customer, did all this sort of stuff, and we built this data set that we didn't realize we had. And what it told us is that a bold move that we had made as a studio was wrong. Yeah. And we were actually losing money because of it. And we had no clue. And so for me, this idea of using data wisely is actually really important to me as a small business owner, because I see, like, I was for 3 months doing it the wrong way and almost could have had a big problem if we hadn't changed course at that halfway mark and like taking another look at what we were doing.
It's hard, and that's a hard realization to come to. And it's great to hear that you made that decision. We go through the same thing. We're a small business too. And recently we look at our customers and say, we compare revenue versus our effort. What do we spend on effort? And we have a couple of customers that have been with us for a really long time. We burn a ton of effort, a lot of high touch. And, we've had to look at, like, it seems crazy to me that you'd ever even consider like firing a customer, right? We didn't do it. We actually changed some of our processes. We got more efficient, found better ways to service them. But we had a moment where we're like, do we let these guys go? And that was hard, right? I remember in the beginning when we didn't have customers, and there were points where I was like, we're going to run out of money. Like, that just seemed crazy to me that we would fire a customer. But we looked at our numbers, and it just didn't make sense to have them in our portfolio of customers. We're really good at what we do, and they were a drain. They were taking away from what we were doing for other customers. Again, we fixed it in a different way, but we had to make a decision, and that decision was totally based on the data that we had in front of us.
Out of curiosity, how did you understand what it cost you from an effort perspective for those customers?
So we track our time, and I mean, that's from me on throughout the organization. We track our time, and we're able to look at not only who client-wise that's tied to, but also the types of tasks. So we did an analysis of, what the complexity of those tasks were, and, are there things that we could automate, and so on. And we compared, out of X number of dollars we make in revenue each month or each year, how much effort do we expend to earn that? And then we broke it out by customer. And there were some that were highly positive, and then there were some that were on the other side, on the flip side, where we were spending a ton of time and ton of effort. And I don't mind doing the work. I love doing the work, but it has to make sense. So we have the mechanism within our business to do that, and that's actually how we've been able to grow. Is we've been really hyper focused on, how do we remain efficient but also profitable. We look at these things regularly to make sure that we're firing on all cylinders. And that's not to say we haven't missed. We have absolutely missed. But we have to look at that, and it has to become a rhythm that you get into to regularly check that and look at it, and not just, it's not set it and forget it and you just move on. But that has become a really key part of how we manage this business.
That feels very affirming to me in a way, just to hear that, because that was a huge portion of how we did that quarterly review, where we were like, how much time are we spending on these people, and where is the place that we make the most margin? And where are the places where we are bleeding money, and like, how can we figure out how to make those places more efficient? How can we, all that sort of thing. And I love the idea of using systems to make things more efficient, which is a little bit counterculture to creative industries. I know that I'm a little bit weird in that way. Like, every business that I've always loved to run is this idea of systematize, make it a process, make it the same thing, repeatable all the time, and then we can make more money on the end and charge less to our customers because it doesn't cost us all this extra.
My team laughs at me every time I say, I've built an SOP or I built a playbook for this. They're like, you really? Like, no, absolutely not. Because I'm the, like, there's always a scientist and a magician. I'm the magician generally when we the way we run our business. They look at it and they go, no way. There's no way you put something together that says we have to do a thing a certain way. We figure it out, but that's how we scale, right? Having those systems in place is how we scale. It was fine when there was 2 or 3 of us and we were just getting the work done. Everybody pitches in. But if you want to grow, you have to have those systems in place.
Yeah.
I have to be able to say, hey, we've got a new customer. They've got a revenue generation or a sales use case. Here's how we should look at that. Now, there's little tweaks to everything, but I can turn 90% of it into a system.
Oh yeah,
and that helps us be more efficient. It has to happen.
Yeah. I don't know if you know JT Harp. He is with Transworld Business Advisors. He was an earlier episode on the show.
Okay.
And one of the things he was talking about is that when you're trying to sell a business, people don't want to buy a job.
Yeah.
They want to buy an asset. And the more that we create these standard operating procedures, these checklists, these whatever it is you want to call it, the more valuable our business becomes to somebody who wants to buy it down the road.
Oh.
And I'm not talking those spam emails we all get saying that they want to buy our company. Like, no, not those.
You mean that one I got today wasn't real?
From whatever Meridian something.
Like, yeah.
No, that's not real. I
need
think.
to tell the guy to stop installing my pool. But yeah, no, I agree with you. I fully agree with you on that. And I hate it. I hate doing it, but at the same time, it absolutely has to happen. And I think one of the things that I think the hardest part is not building the process, it's adhering to it, right?
Yeah.
Like that's the hardest thing that I struggle with is like, I can write it. This looks great, but actually doing it and then having a way to measure it. And that's what we do for our customers is provide a tool that allows them to measure what their teams are doing, what their people are doing, what their customers are saying. But that's the hard part is like actually sticking to it, doing it, and then measuring it. Does it really pan out the way that you expect that it would?
And then I'd say that the next layer to that also is a feedback process for where it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of people put out SOPs and say, this is it, like do it this way. And then they don't listen to the person who's like, actually, this doesn't work.
Yeah.
Like we need to change this.
Yeah.
And that was something that I learned a little bit about when I work with people. Like I write an SOP, I give it to somebody and they say, why is this in there? Like, oh, right. That doesn't make sense to you. That makes sense to me. That doesn't make sense to you. Yeah. So that continuous feedback loop of improving and trying to understand how to make these processes better, just make us a better company.
Yeah. I mean, that's something that came up for us in like the last few days. We were talking about a playbook we have for sales. How do we approach a sales use case and how do we systematize that? And our CEO was looking at it and he said, like, where's the AI in this? Like, how do we, we've got all of these internal processes where we're leveraging AI to make our team better and so on. And he goes, I don't see that in here. And I was like, oh, back to the drawing board, right?
Yeah.
Now I have to go and revise this, but that is it. It's constant iteration.
Oh, yeah.
How do we make it better? And it's not every day, but there needs to be a rubric. There needs to be a repeatable process, a cycle of how you look at these things and just constantly try and make them better. One of the things that I'm sure I've struggled with in the past is like, we build this thing, it works. Like, why do we have to change it? But if you're looking at it that way, it's wrong, right? You have to constantly be looking and saying, how do I make my business better? How do I build processes that keep us efficient, drive revenue, et cetera? So.
Well, and another layer on that is the classic saying of working on the business, not in the business.
Yeah.
And so many small businesses, myself included, we're still at that stage where I am in the business every single day.
Yeah.
But the ability to somehow find that margin to be working on the business and think about those things, the better you can grow. I know Josh is back there probably listening to this and laughing at me because the amount of times I walk into the office and he hears me say, I had an idea. He probably just rolls his eyes at this point. But it's one of those things where it's like, okay, I think I had some margin. I thought about it. I think we're doing something wrong. We need to figure out how to fix this.
Yeah. We got stuck in a cycle for a small period of time where we were spending too much time working in the business. You know, it was day-to-day customer partnership interactions, you know, just really being deep in the weeds on that. And I mean, it's good to get that deep from time to time, but we had to do a real gut check and say, look, we've got to take a step back and start focusing on how do we, you know, increase our footprint with customers? What other services can we offer, and so on. So we went through that recently. And it's been great. Honestly, it's like revitalized how I look at our business. Like, it's so much more fun for me. You know, I know the day to day inside and out. At first I was the only employee, you know, and we've grown, you know, quite a bit since then. But now it's looking at it and saying, how do I, like we were talking about making it into a system, how do I do more of that to allow us to grow and to expand that footprint and so on. So yeah, it's a completely different animal.
Yeah. Well, so I've got two other directions I want to take this conversation.
Okay.
I want to go down the path of AI, but I'm going to save that for last.
Okay.
Because I think that that's fun, and we're going to tease that in a minute. But I didn't prep you for this question, so I apologize. When you and I first had our discovery conversation around this podcast, one of the things that I was surprised by was the idea that you are the founder, but you hired a CEO. I'm curious, what is the reasoning behind that? Why did you take yourself out of that seat?
So I'm the practitioner. I knew what I was best at that time was how to provide the service that we provide. I needed help, absolutely needed help growing and running the business. And that's what I needed. So I needed a CEO. I needed somebody to come in and say, this is how we're going to sell. This is, you know, this is how we're going to model our business. This is how we're going to price. And, you know, I actually felt pretty good about it at that time because I was self-aware enough that I knew it was a shortcoming. That wasn't something that I was good at. I was really good at the other part and I could excel there, but I really needed help. So that's why we did that. And you are not the first person to ask me that question. You are definitely not the first person to ask me that question. I actually had a prospect call once that somebody asked me that in a rather like aggressive way. It was like, you're the founder of your company, but you have a CEO. Like, how are you? And I didn't respond too well to it, but I was like, look, you have to know your strengths. You have to be self-aware enough to say, look, I need somebody to fill that role and it's not me. Yeah, cool. It would be cool to have that title, but I want the business to succeed. I don't care what you call me at the end of the day. And I knew where I fit and where I fit best. So that's why.
That's an incredibly humble take. What I'm curious though is, so you now have a boss, technically, but also you still own the company. So like the question that I have is like, how does that dynamic work of not being the CEO, but you're the founder? Like how does that work from the day to day? Was that you had to write out something super clear about how that relationship functioned? Like what was that?
We hit it off really well from the beginning, where there's like, I gave the like scientist and magician thing before. He's definitely the scientist. I take the magician part and we interact very well. We bounce decisions off of each other really well. It is a balancing act. It's absolutely a balancing act. But I think the biggest key to the success that we've had as an interaction between the two of us has been the way that our personalities kind of mesh. And the ability to kind of be humble and say like, hey, I know I'm not good at the CEO part of this business. I need you for that. You know, have the respect for me that I'm an expert at what I do. And we've always been able to maintain that. It doesn't mean we always agree at all, but we've always been able to balance that. And I think it's really been key to our success. I think it's an interesting kind of dynamic too. So yeah, you're definitely not the first person to ask about this. So not the first time I've had to walk through this.
Well, in my head, it just kind of sounds like the company already started and then you brought in a partner, basically.
Yeah.
Who usually up here on the bookshelf, we have Traction by Gino Wickman sitting there, and like the idea of the visionary and the integrator. And so like, it's obvious that like, while you have some, if you call yourself the magician, I see you as the visionary who's going after the things. And then the technician, the integrator, is your CEO who's making sure that everything's working, and that your bottom line's still working, and the company's still running, and I think that is not easy to do. But I'm very impressed that you were able to make that call. That's not simple.
It had to happen. I honestly say if we didn't make that decision, we wouldn't be sitting here right now. Maybe I'd be sitting here doing something else, but it wouldn't be this. It was honestly one of the best decisions we've made. And it was hard, but just looking at the business and seeing where the gaps were, it was something that needed to happen.
That makes total sense. Yeah. I think there's this culture around startups and entrepreneurship that people want to have whole ownership of something. And the argument that I had to have with myself, who thought that exact same thing, was, would you like to have 100% of nothing or 50% of something amazing, or 100% of a small thing? But if you bring in somebody else who can do this, you got 70% of an amazingly huge, awesome thing. And I think that's a perspective that a lot of us should really take around this idea of finding amazing partners that we can do business with, that really help us in our weaknesses. Josh helps me in a lot of the weaknesses that I have. I am not a great salesman. I am not a great person at follow-up, but I really love technical things. I love storytelling. I love crafting ideas. And so the two of us combined make a functioning entrepreneur.
Magician.
Yeah. Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes it's so totally true. So now I want to pivot to AI.
Okay.
First question I have for you. What is your AI hot take right now?
Ooh, that one you didn't prep me for either.
No.
What's my AI hot take? People are too scared about AI.
Ooh.
I think people are way too scared about it. There is some fear that it's going to change how we work, that it's going to, people are going to lose jobs. I think people are too scared. I strongly believe that if you have that fear, you should be channeling it into, how do I use AI to do what I'm currently doing better, or to do something else, to just familiarize yourself with the myriad of tools that are out there right now. Just get good at it. And I really think there's too much fear out there about what it could do. Some of it's real. I think a lot of it is imagined. That's my probably lukewarm take on.
I think it's a hot take at this moment. I think it's very true, because the amount of people who are afraid of it are people who, honestly, are the ones that I should not worry as much. The amount of people that I hear that are afraid of it are often people in service or trades industries where AI is not coming for that job very quickly.
Yeah.
It is going to be way down the road.
Yeah.
It's the more white collar jobs that AI is taking over first.
Yeah.
And so for me, yeah. And if you're really afraid of AI, I just say please and thank you every once in a while, and it'll recognize that you're a kind person. And maybe when the machines rise, you'll be fine.
Debatable.
So what is your favorite thing that you've discovered in the world of AI right now?
From a business sense, from a personal sense,
doesn't matter.
I mean, there's a lot out there. I'm just fascinated by the way that it has given me more leverage on my time. As I mentioned before, one of the things I'm working on is brand awareness for Zen. And I am, like you, I'm not a great salesperson. I've had to become one. I don't market myself well. I've got a lot of great ideas. I am the guy who comes in the room and says, I've got this amazing idea. We should do X. But how do I turn that into something that's going to get more eyes on our business, get more people aware of us? I struggle with that. So one of the things that I find the most fascinating about AI is it takes my wild ass ideas and it helps me kind of organize them in a way that I can turn that then into some piece of content or something that I can use to kind of push my business forward. It takes all of the harebrained schemes and turns them into something that I can work with. That to me is great. I think anything that I can use a machine for that gives me more leverage on my time is incredible. We have weekly meetings with our team where we talk about, how do we use AI in our day to day, the things that we, the tasks that we have to do, the projects that we work on for customers and so on. And it's exciting to see how it's changing how we work, because I want to see my team, who are incredibly smart people, way smarter than me. I want to see how it elevates their work and lets them do more consultative work for our customers, and, allows them to interpret as opposed to like move cells around in a database or on an Excel sheet. Like that to me is like incredibly exciting. So from a business sense, that's really where I get the most joy out of it right now.
Yeah. I'm in the boat where I'm still discovering the depths of AI in some ways. Like you and I were talking about how I was building an AI agent recently for the first time. Like I'd never written a prompt that was that many lines before. Like I think it's 200-300 lines this prompt was, but I was like, the thing that is blowing me away with AI right now is our studio purchased a premium license to OpenAI, like ChatGPT. And one of the first things that I had not seen before in AI was how contextual it can be. Like we all were excited when Siri came out for the first time, or when Google Assistant came out for the first time, because we're like, oh, they're going to be able to do this amazing things for us. They never did. And now we're just starting to see the depths of like, oh, ChatGPT actually added something into this prompt that it knew about me that I didn't ask it for, and it was really helpful. Like I asked it to create a process for something, and it was like, it threw in these extra lines into it, and I was like, oh, right, I hadn't thought about that. Thank you. That was really helpful. I needed that in my process. I think those things right now are super helpful. The idea that Jarvis from Iron Man is becoming more likely to actually happen. Like it's getting closer.
It's the trajectory and how fast things are moving right now is crazy. Like how just the tools that everybody now has on their phone have gotten so much better in the last 18 months is crazy to me. And it's exciting. It really is. And I think that's one of the reasons why we have such a focus on it internally, is like, look, if we're not talking about this, if we're not trying to figure out like cool new ways to use these tools, we're falling behind. It's something we should be immersing ourselves in. Whether it's for, business processes, or like I said earlier, just making memes, right? Just to do something funny. I was talking to my daughter earlier this week, she's back to school, and I was like, how do you use AI for school? And she thought it was a gotcha. She's like, he's going to get mad if I say I use it for homework, right? And I would have been excited if she said that. She didn't say that. She said, I use it for, I used it to help me with a study guide at the end of last year for a biology test I was nervous about. And I was like, that's so cool. It's like, well, let's take that to the next level. Let's, instead of making a study guide, let's make a study game that's interactive. That might be a little bit more engaging. And she's like, okay, that's cool. Like those are the things that are like so exciting to me right now, that like it lowers the barriers to entry for somebody like you who've never coded before. You can do that now. It's just wild to think of that you don't need to go out and hire a developer to do that work that would have cost you thousands of dollars before, to hire somebody to do that work. Now you can just do it yourself. It's crazy.
So then I'm curious, since the world that you kind of work in is data around human communication, the world of human communication is being replaced slowly but surely. How are you future-proofing your company against the idea that AI agents will be this call centers?
You absolutely are still going to need people. You're going to need people to interpret, to react. AI is great about repeatable tasks, low complexity, high effort tasks. But to respond to someone that maybe is struggling, the urgent care example, if you've got a sprained ankle or you need to go get stitched up, you do not want to talk to a robot. You want to talk to somebody that's going to be to be able to empathize with you, to be able to respond to your needs. that's going to maybe even not hear the words that you're saying, but hear the way that you're saying something and respond to that, you're going to have that human connection. Now that human might be using, an assistant to help them with, clinical information. But you're still going to need a human. So I don't see the human coming out of that interaction or coming out of all interactions anytime soon. There's going to be spaces where, you need to change your address with your bank. Yeah, of course, that's something that I don't need to talk to a human for. But there are, high complexity, high touch types of interactions that you can't take a human out of. So I don't see that going anywhere. I think it elevates. I think it's going to elevate what we look at in the customer experience and contact center space, because you're not going to be doing those, again, lower complexity tasks anymore. It's really going to elevate the interaction to something, human to human.
Yeah. Well, from my experience, some of the things that I see when I see some of these advancements in voice to text, the way that LLMs can converse now, like I think you're taking a great approach to it. I personally think that AI is going to replace the base level customer service manager. Like in my perspective, I could totally see like when you call into a technical support or something like that, they say, hey, let me escalate you to my manager. The manager is human. That first person you call may not be. Do you see that as being something, or?
Well, I think it moves the human up a few levels in how you're going to be interacting. Like I say this with our team all the time. I want to use the resources we have, the humans that we have, to do higher order tasks. So yeah, I fully agree with that. And I don't think it's just in contact center CX space. I think it's going to be in a lot of places, right? It could be marketing. Think about how easy for somebody like me who doesn't know anything about creating content. I can get a start by using AI, right? I can get a leg up. I don't need somebody to do that for me. So I think it moves us to higher order topics, and that's exciting, right? That's what we're good at. We're good at the nuance. We're good at interpretation, and AI isn't going to be able to understand that. Like, how many times have you used AI and it's misinterpreted something you've said?
Yeah.
You were even talking about Siri. Like, think about 10 years ago when you would try and do voice to text and how bad it was.
It was horrible.
And how bad that was. And that was like leading edge at that point of saying, like, I'm turning waveforms. I'm turning audio into text. And it was terrible at it, and it was still cool.
Yeah. Palm Pilots had it back in the day.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, I have a buddy from high school. He's got a Greek last name, and I used to in my old truck, I would say, call his name, and my truck would read it back, and it would say his last name as Angry Fetus.
Oh no!
And his name is in my phone as that, because it was the funniest thing ever.
Oh,
and
yeah.
it was bad text to speech.
Yeah.
And it was just one of those things that wouldn't happen now.
Yeah.
And it's so silly, and I can't believe I just brought that up. But it's come such a long way, and it's fascinating to me.
I think you're totally right. I think one of the things that was so interesting about early 2000s is technology exploded. The internet exploded. Yeah. Like all of these things, like we watched it happen. And now the developments are in the software side, where it's behind the scenes. You don't see it quite as clearly, but once you recognize where we were just a few years ago, it's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about the people that are marketing experts, they know how the ins and outs of how to make Google see you. Like, you've got to look at your business completely differently now. Like, because how do I get in front of AI? Like, I can't remember last time I used Google for search, right? So I like how that changes that. Now it's at the end of the day, it's still asking a question, getting an answer. It's doing it in a different way. But now how do I manipulate that for me? And how do I build a business around that? It's wild to me.
All right, last question.
Okay.
You're talking to a budding entrepreneur.
Okay.
They are starting to figure something out. They have an idea. What is the one piece of business advice you give anyone who is in that space of first time ever starting something? What do you say to them?
I really prescribe to the idea of begin with the end in mind. So you may have a cool idea, but what problem does it solve? The video troubleshooting thing we were talking about before. It's a cool idea, but does it really solve the problem? Does it reduce friction? So I think you start from, you work backwards from the problem. And that I think would save a lot of people a lot of headaches, a lot of heartache. What we did with our business was we saw a gap. The technology was out there, but mid-sized businesses couldn't do what they wanted to do with it because they didn't have the people. So our big value add is we bring people, we bring experts in to help you deploy this thing that you've always had access to, but you just didn't have the people to really make it run. So I think you have to solve the problem and work backwards from there. I really think that's important. And keep it simple. Like simplification for me is with the amount of data that we work with, really distill the problem down into its simplest form. And don't overcomplicate it, because the simplest solutions generally are the ones that are the most effective. So that would be absolutely it.
That's amazing, dude. This has been amazing. I can't thank you enough. That hour whizzed by.
Was that an hour?
That was an hour. That was crazy. But wow. Thank you so much for your time, man. If people are trying to connect with you, how do they connect with you?
They can go to our website, Zenylitics.com. I'm sure we'll add that in at some point because it's hard to spell. Looking back, I probably would have made it a little bit easier. So they can get us at Zenylitics.com. Kyle Carter on LinkedIn. That's probably the best places to get at me.
Awesome. Thank you, Kyle. I really
Thanks
appreciate
for having
it.
me. This was awesome.
Yeah, this was great. Thanks so much for listening to the Cincinnati Business Podcast. If you like the show, the best way to support us is to like, comment, and subscribe so we can keep bringing you fantastic content just like this. And if you are a greater Cincinnati-based business owner who has something you want to share with the world, reach out to me at brian@cincinnatipodcaststudio.com.